Thank you. This is it's quite a conversation. Thank you for hosting. So my question is really about bad white American Christian theology and the role that it's played in this painful history that you all have so thoroughly documented and presented here. And so the question is, does this road to nonviolence have to run through or around the American white church? If it's through the church, are there any glimmers of hope that any of you see, either because there's a coming generational shift in church leaders, or maybe the pressure of the continued decline in church attendance and the relevance of the church, or maybe in something else, or maybe the road doesn't go through the white American church? I know this, that you are not a faith-based organization at Telos, but so much of this is grounded in faithlessness. I'd be interested in your perspective.
Is that for Greg?
I think for the panelists, right?
Well, I mean, I spend a lot of time, my primary work is within the faith community, and particularly I do a lot of work with white evangelicals and really trying to shepherd them out of white supremacy, basically. And so it's a calling, and I think it's kind of like oftentimes white evangelicals is focused on saving the world, but not really thinking about saving themselves, and so I think there's some significant work to be done in that area. I mean, I really do, because at the end of the day, I mean, these folks are very sincere people, but just don't really understand the level and depth of the problem. And it's been so baked. I mean, what happened when you're in I don't think we were in a Christian nation, but I think we were in a Christian consciousness that was going on. And so just faith or not, just two human beings can't just punch each other, commit violent acts against each other, and be okay with it. Like, there has to be a thing, like at some point, like if let's just, use Greg for an example, I have to do something to dehumanize him in my mind in order for me to justify me committing an act of violence for him. And so really the religion of America has been greed, it's been money, and so we talk about identity theft today, but the primary source of the first identity theft that happened on American soil was Jesus. It was the Christian faith. I mean, you stick a cross in and say, hey, we own this land, and anything that we do is justified in the name of Jesus. It's just our predestined, it's manifest destiny, like all these things. And if you just read anything about what Jesus said, that's not what Jesus was about. I mean, Jesus brought healing even when one of his partners committed an act of violence. And so, I say all that to say that I think there has to be a reckoning within white evangelical, and Mainline has a different type of version. Like just to let you know, white progressive and liberal Christians aren't better at actually practicing race. They're better at talking about it, but statistically, they tend to be less diverse than even white evangelical. So at least and I kind of see it as two versions of it. Like, you got one form of white supremacy where it's indifference. Another one is paternalism, but it's still white people in charge at the end of the day, And so, so I do think that there is, I like Robert Jones's work, The End of White America, The End of White Christian America. And I haven't read it yet, but it's just on my queue to read. I think White No Longer, or something like that. He has a new book that just came out. But I say all that to say is that I do think that there is a reckoning that needs to happen, and like a truth and reconciliation needs to happen within the white church structure. I don't think that in and of itself that going the black church or immigration, I think like a mosaic theology. I think like a working together of, we all have different gifts and limitations that I think that ultimately we need to move forward. And I also I think there's a purging that's going to happen. I mean, less people are engaged with faith, and to be honest, for good reasons. And I'm a minister, you know what I'm saying? Like, and so I'm a pastor, but so, and it's like, hey, I get it. And I think like, and I'm like, but I think what you're rejecting is white supremacy. I don't think you're actually rejecting, a true, beautiful faith, but I do think like statistically, there are less people engaging in formalized faith and religion. But I do think that the more that people, I believe the more that people kind of do what Jesus did and preach what Jesus preached and lived how Jesus wants us to live, then I think more people would be attracted to it. And I'm kind of okay with people rejecting a false religion. Like, I mean, there is a significant false religion, and even James Cone goes as far as to say, it's like he just wonders who's really saved. Like how can, like if you read the Cross and the Lynching Tree and the guy that oppressed him, he really says like, hey, like, I mean, if your faith is supposed to be lived out, and this is what your lived out faith looks like, are you really a follower of Jesus? And I think these are questions that we have to ask ourselves and engage in. So I'm sorry that was a long answer, but I think there's denunciation that needs to happen, and I think there's a new imagination for a Mosaic kind of theology where all people are made, and the diversity and the unity helps us to see a clearer picture of who God is and how we can walk faithfully.
Thank you, David. Cassandra, did you want to jump in? Kindy, would you like to ask your question? I think, Cassandra, you might want to take this one. Would you unmute Kindy Rutina?
Hey, Greg.
Hey. Good, you're
I've got kids in the background if you hear background noise. You can come in, Eddie. Yeah, so my question was about the Black Lives Matter organization. And, like, I would just love to hear your comments on it, because a lot of the conversation I have with family members, they want to just dismiss Black Lives Matter in general because of the negative press that the organization is getting, particularly on different news sources. So I would just love to hear what you guys think about that.
So, Kendi, are you saying that they support Black Lives Matter, but they want to not have, but they want to dismiss them because of the negative press that they're getting, and they think that will make it go away?
I think they are blaming the organization for, like you guys talked about, some of like the violence and things like that, but also they bring in the words Marxism and socialism and want to make the whole movement, put the whole movement under that umbrella. So how do you differentiate between the organization and some of the press it's getting, and then the actual movement, which includes so much more than that? Does that make sense?
Yes. And I invite David and Anka to jump in. And they'll have to pretty it up for me.
You don't have to pretty anything up.
That's interesting because, of course, yeah, we've heard that before, and to me, it goes back to a lot of what David and Anka have said around the values, the dismissiveness, the conscious racism that has been so embedded, I think, in white culture, and not having a real, not wanting to have, or not understanding that what Black people's experiences are. Like, that's just, a dismissing. So they're dismissing it, as such, which is, again, going back to what David talks about. I think he's a philosopher. The historical analysis that he laid out, like, it is absolutely real. And so For me, I'm not about convincing. You know, I feel like that's not my role. And that may be more what the church needs to do. For me, it really is about on the end of, you know, we got to continue as Black people, you know, moving. And it's, I just don't feel like it's my responsibility to have to tell you. But I do believe that there are opportunities. I don't know, David and Anchor may have to come in there and share how. Because that, for me, that's frustrating, right? And so I can't even enter it. So I have to like be on the other side of that and just like, come on, Black people, let's just keep it moving. And we'll let the other people who've been called to do that to, you know, have that conversation. Because it's about, you know, their own internal oppression, right? In which to me, they've got to undo and undergo. And to me, that's where that comes in. And how you get them there, I don't know, that's not my work. And that could be where, you know, Anchor comes in, but it's, they have to undo their own oppression. But for me, it's not about convincing them that, that no, Black Lives Matter is not trying to do that. No, to me, that's like about you. Like they have to, I think the finger has to be pointed back to them. Like, why you feel that way? Did you know this? You know, so I'm gonna just leave it there and let them answer.
Yeah, I think that's important because, you know, I would ask you two questions and you don't have to respond to these, but one I would ask, do they really want to understand? Because that's important, because if they have a heart for it, for understanding, and they just don't have all of the information, right? Well, we can help give information, right? But if it's just a thing to stop a conversation or to start a debate, that's a whole nother thing, right? And so even my answer to John's question about will it go to the church? Well, to me, that largely depends on white Christians, right? Because you all are most connected, right? And so if you all do your internal work and then help your neighbor, right, come along, then that answers, at least in theory, that question. And so I would, in addition to wanting to know sort of where their heart is on it, change the conversation from Black Lives Matter, the organization, to do you believe all lives matter? Yes. Is that inclusive of Black lives? Yeah. Okay. So, you know, from a Christian context, John 15, 13 says, oh shoot, it left that quickly. But says something of the nature of, laying down your life for a friend. And so what I have, maybe it's the No Greater Love. David, you can help me. You know this. I had it pulled up and it went away. Okay, here it is. No greater love has no one than this, to lay down their one's life for friends. And so I charge people to use their life for Black lives. Like, if you believe Black lives matter, let's not get caught up in the organization, right? If you believe that, right, how are you using your labor, your influence, your finances, or your expertise to help your life, right? Because we've been called, Jesus says it, to lay down our life. So how are you doing it? And so shift the conversation from one that is polarizing to meeting them wherever they are. And so if they really have a heart with it, start there.
Yes.
Go on.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a tactical standpoint, like what Anchor said, I mean, I think the way I would respond to this space, I would ask the question, hey, are you looking for an opportunity to disengage, or an opportunity to do something to be helpful? You know, and so hopefully the answer to the question, like, if there's opportunity to disengage, I mean, hopefully it makes them think. Most likely they're looking for opportunity to disengage. But nobody really wants to say that out loud. So then you can look for the opportunity to be able to be in this space. And I think there's a couple of things that, if folks really want to understand, I've had some people who have genuinely wrestled and asked some genuine questions. Some of it has to do with economic philosophy of, capitalism versus Marxism versus socialism. I think that there's, I think people give Karl Marx, I just think they just don't give him the proper historical context. He wrote Communist Manifesto in 1848. What was happening in 1848? You had the transatlantic slavery was abolished, but like you had like the capital were black bodies in 1848, and you had the black women's wombs were the investment that was going there. They were like impregnating women like at 10, 15 babies and shipping them around the country in the economic move. And so like to disassociate capitalism from that crazy level of violence is intellectual dishonesty, and a lot of people don't understand that. But then you have the rise of a revolution that Karl Marx wasn't really addressing that issue, but that was the base level normativity that was going on. And then you have the Industrial Revolution that's happening at that same time. And so, you have children and people with laborers that are not really are treating people like machines and not like human beings. And so this was the impetus of him trying to figure out what was going on. And so then, you got to realize that like when Adam Smith was talking about wealth of nations, again, this is a transatlantic slavery happening. This is taking stolen land, stolen labor, and just the raping of black women's bodies. That, like, to me, that's the greatest tragedy of slavery. It's just like, and I think we think about the stolen labor, but you're talking about stolen wombs. That's just violation upon violation. And so I think that's just like important to understand. That is when Adam Smith is naming capitalism, that's what that is. And then when Karl Marx is trying to figure out what is wrong and how can we have an imagination for something different, that is happening in the context of this brutal capitalistic society that was genuinely brutal. Now, we don't do that now. You can just, hey, I can raise